I want to talk about passive record. Is there anybody here who's not at least somewhat familiar with Rails?
Oh, Rails.
No Rails?
No, I knew the Rails. I thought you were going to say familiar with passive record.
Okay, no, yeah, almost nobody should be familiar with passive record, but is there anybody here, so everyone's at least somewhat familiar with Rails, so I can talk about active record and you know what I'm talking about. Those are your models in your Rails app. Passive record is something I started working on maybe 3 weeks ago to solve the problem in an app that Scott and I are working on. There's at least 7 or 8 tables that serve no purpose other than to look things up in. The content of the tables don't even change. In fact, a few of them are just one of them's just 2 things, another one of the tables is 5 or 6 things. I think the biggest one's like 250 things. The contents just never change. There's a lot of joins that happen in the app through active record, and a lot of just arbitrary SQL queries flying around. It don't need to be, because this stuff, we don't need to be looking this stuff up constantly. It never changes. So I said, well, maybe I can make these into constants without having to change the API. So it's just a drop-in replacement. So instead of my model being active record base, it's passive record base. I'm going to define the schema right here in the code and create some things, and then I can work with these within my app just as if they were passive record class. This is what the previous would have been in active record after migration. Put my database. This is the contents in the database, and then there's the model. Obviously, the model itself is a little bit shorter, but you know, whatever. It's all in one place. We can have many countries, just like the have many countries. These are some of the things I can do to pull them out. Just like active record, I can say find by ID. I can find by name. I don't know if you know, in Rails you can chain attribute and attribute and attribute and attribute to any arbitrary thing that have multiple conditions. But I can do ranges and I can do regular expressions in passive record because it's all pure Ruby as far as when I'm passing things undefined. Here's some of the associations I can do. This is my passive record class. I can have one, I can has many, and all of these are active records, which are here, here, and here. And that's what they look like. They belong to, you can't have a model where your foreign key is going to be on the passive record, because if you do, it's probably not a passive record. It's probably something that changes. So you couldn't have, Sambo Crank couldn't have many fauces, because then there'd be many fauces, and that is variable type stuff. And that's not really the point of the whole thing. As many through was kind of a bitch to get working. That didn't start working until yesterday. And some things about it still won't work. You can't do a self-referential has many through. But then if you're doing that, you need to be using active record anyway. If you want to use it, just install passive record. Passive record's at 0.1. I'm probably going to publish 0.2 tonight, since I got has many through working. And codedred.org is paintedred is Scott, James, and I, and a buddy of ours in Orlando, and we work on stuff. And codedred is where we keep track of the stuff we work on. So if you want to see the wiki or check out the code, that's where you go, or you can just use the gem. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions?
Yeah, so there's been some talk about trying to extract the basal part of active record, active model, and then that way you can backstore with anything, right? So backstore with SQL, you can backstore with this.
A hash.
Yeah. So did you essentially have to go into active record and look to see how they implemented some of these things and then sort of make something equivalent, or? What
I did was I originally wanted to start with subclassing active record base, and then just kind of nipping off the SQL, and then saying, you know, something that subclasses passive record instead of active record. We're not going to put it in SQL. We're going to put it in a big giant hash. And didn't work out because there's just too much meta going on in Active Record
Yeah.
for me to sift through it all. What I did end up doing was to put the has many associations and the has one association on passive record. I kind of dove down into Active Record and bit by bit took pieces of code, just what I needed. All in all, I ended up like ganking about 250 lines out of Active Record so that passive records could have those associations with Active Record. And there's some methods that are on the passive record class that are just kind of arbitrary so that things don't blow up. Because there's a lot of delegation going on so that I don't have to define methods in the passive record class that are already done in Active Record. So
Do you maintain all the relationship metadata?
it's done. I actually delegate those, like when it goes to create the what do they call them? Reflections.
Right.
It goes to create all the reflections when you call has many. Like if you've ever looked at Rails under the hood in Active Record, when you say has many, you're actually creating a whole slew of reflection objects. And most of that just gets delegated to Active Record. Like it just says Active Record base, reflection, blah, 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 create this. So all that code, I don't need it. It pretty much all works because Rails is a lot of duck typing. These methods don't care what class they are, what superclass they are. They just care if they respond to the right methods. So I just have to put the right methods on passive record to get it to work. And, everything's in one big giant hash. The other thing I didn't mention was, you can see here, create one. This is how I'm specifying what would otherwise be the primary key in my database. Those don't have to be integers. They could be any arbitrary value I want. And then when I find one, I could say find foo, find by this string, find by this symbol. Because it's Ruby, it can be whatever. It could be some object. It doesn't matter. It's just, that's what's going to be the key in the giant hash that you use. You have to be able to do 2S on it though. So that's the only trick. I'll get this all documented soon. It's all kind of being pounded out recently. Any other questions? That's straight from the tests, by the way. That's what my test schema stuff looks like for my tests. Because I got really frustrated trying to think of actual real-world examples where I could set up these associations. I started with my room. Like, you know, house has the rooms, and then house has. It really pissed me off. So I just started making up words.
Yeah, this lexicon.
Yeah, I found an online word generator where I just hit generate and it would just give me funny words that kind of had realistic Latin bases. Yeah, yeah. I have many Rizzo cables through Sambo cranks. It just seems to make sense, doesn't it? So. All right.